Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast for another Big 12 team preview. We've got the TCU Horned Frogs led by Jamie Dixon. If you have been liking our content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate all your support. But going to dive in here, looking at their offensive and defensive strengths and weaknesses. First, starting on the offensive side of the ball. They did bring in a new point guard in Brock Harding and another guard in Jaden Pierre coming from Providence and Iowa. But what do you see for strengths in this offensive group?
Yeah, I think it's a group that got a little more offensive-centric in general, and I think it starts with the improved shooting after an absolutely horrendous year shooting the ball last year. I think a lot of people kind of knew that they weren't going to shoot the ball well, but what it turned into was pretty ugly. They finished 342nd in the country in three-point percentage and 330th in effective field goal percentage, so they just really couldn't score from anywhere. But when you add pieces like Brock Harding, who shot at 40%, Jaden Pierre shot at 34%, and you have some off-ball shooting options in Tanner Toulson, who shot at 35%, but he's probably a better shooting talent than that. 6 attempts a game, took some really tough threes. I think if advantages are created for him more often, he'll be fine. And then Leotoris Lelovicius, coming from Oregon State, shot at 38%. I think it's going to help this team in a half-court setting that really struggled in this area last year. They were in the 9th percentile in half-court offensive efficiency last year, which is just dreadful for a power conference team. They don't really have elite shooting by any means, but I do think it's a major step in the right direction. There's no real front court floor spacing besides maybe the JUCO transfer in Xavier Edmonds, who shot at 20 for 64. That was 2 years ago because he was here at TCU all year last year, just decided, I think he redshirted. So I think there's a little bit of upside with Edmonds as a floor spacing 4. And this is still going to be a good offensive rebounding unit. Maybe a step behind past years, but this is always a Jamie Dixon emphasis. Since 2008, all but one Jamie Dixon team has finished inside the top 100 nationally in offensive rebound rate. They finished 83rd last year. I think they can finish in that ballpark when they have guys like Malik Diallo, David Punch, Vianney Salachome, and then Xavier Edmonds, like I mentioned. I think they'll all be impactful here. So like the rotation's kind of uncertain up front. I don't really know what we're going to get for a minute share, but I do think they have enough volume of front court players to be fine in this area.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think one other thing to mention on the strength side, this is more just a forecast, bringing in Harding and Jaden Pierre in particular, and then looking at what their front court pieces are. Xavier Edmonds moves pretty well. He's a good athlete. David Punch, 6'7", he can run the floor well. I think they are going to play faster and be able to get out and transition a little bit. I think the tempo is going to be a little bit faster this year. I mean, just watching some Xavier Edmonds tape, he moves up and down the floor really well. He's got some real bounce, it seems like. And even like you mentioned on the offensive glass, I saw a few clips of him where he just grabs an offensive rebound and he can jump quickly right into like punching it on somebody's head. So I don't know if it's going to look exactly like that, of course, coming now into the Big 12 versus JUCO. But I do think this team can play fast with those two guys at guard, and then everyone else around them. And I think it fits the roster a little bit to play a little bit quicker. However, for weaknesses, I do have concerns with their ability to take care of the basketball. I think Brock Harding, we saw last year he struggled. He had a usage rate around 23%. So, no small usage rate. And he turned it over at a 25% clip in 16 top 50 games, 23.1% overall. And then looking at a guy like Jaden Pierre, 19.8% turnover rate versus just an 18% assist rate. And then 21.8% in 12 top 50 games for turnover rate. So, and that's a 3-year sample size now of Jaden Pierre not taking care of the basketball. He's got a career 21.4% turnover rate. And then beyond those two guys, like the the on-ball guard depth isn't great, so it's not like they have other options to turn to. So I do have concerns, particularly if they are, with this roster, going to play a little bit faster. I think with the numbers that we've seen out of both those guys in the turnover category, it has to be a concern whether or not they're going to take care of the basketball or not.
Yeah, I mean, that was my main concern as well. I would say I wouldn't call these two like the greatest of like on-ball creators or just like pure guys that can get into the lane and then make a play for somebody else out of it. I think Brock Harding is somewhat of a benefit of the Iowa system, but also I do think he's a talented passer. I just think he, struggles to get to the lane on his own. And then Jaden Pierre, when he has the ball in his hands, he's kind of looking to get his own shot. And you've seen it when he tries to, make plays for others, he gets a little bit erratic, hence the high turnover rate. So, and the fact there's no depth really behind those two guys from like even a ball handling perspective, it's not great. Like Toulson and Lolovicius aren't really going to be handling the ball all that much. You have a 4-star in Caden Edwards, but I'm not sure he's all that ready. Listed at 6'2", 165 pounds. So not really sure if he's ready from a physical standpoint. I think a guy like Xavier Edmonds could kind of open up the half-court offense, take a little bit of responsibility off of those two guys. But to be honest, I don't know if he's going to start. I don't know what his role looks like. I would be curious to see how he practiced this past year and what his true role is going to look like if he starts and provides value as a versatile scorer at the 4 position. I think this offense looks a little different, but for now, I think they still have their large share of concerns.
Definitely. RJ Jones is another guy too that I think like he's not going to provide anything really in terms of taking care of the basketball either. He's 1 year last year at Kansas State, 20.4% turnover rate. So I worry about their ability to take care of the ball. Now looking at the defensive side of the ball, what do you see for strengths here? Obviously a bunch of guys in that like 6'5" to 6'9" range, but nobody really bigger than that. And then, the couple guards smaller than that we've talked about in Pierre and Harding.
Yeah, I mean, this is usually the side of the ball that Jamie Dixon's really good on, at least in his TCU days. He had some good offenses at Pittsburgh, but his recent TCU teams have really been able to tap into the defensive side, and I think it's because of their ability to force turnovers and, like you mentioned, their front court size, versatility, and athleticism. I think is probably going to win out. The last 3 Jamie Dixon teams have finished inside the top 60 in turnover rate forced. I think Brock Harding is going to be really valuable in this area. He had a 3.4% steal rate at Iowa last year, and just the aggressive style in general is going to lead to a high rate in its own. But like even if there's some obviously projectable defenders on this roster, and an example that I would use from last year, like a guy like Trezarian White wasn't really a great defender guarding the ball, but I think it's a really great example of how coming into like having a better scheme fit is going to help a defender out. Like Trezarian White, he had a 1.1% steal rate at UNCW in 2023. Last year he had a 3% steal rate, and he had the top defensive box plus minus for any TCU perimeter player last year. So it really showed that, a 6'6" wing with like projectable athleticism has real upside in this defense, and he has plenty of those guys like David Punch. Toulson has a little bit of athleticism in there. Micah Robinson, Jace Posey, all of those guys, even Xavier Edmonds. Like he has a lot of guys that can be really good and like are projectable athletes, and I think they fit in the scheme.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. For me, the turn now to weaknesses, I worry about, again, I think it's the guard depth again, right? Like Brock Harding has shown the ability to force some turnovers. Jaden Pierre, not really a great defender. Career 1.3% steal rate, doesn't really bring a ton on that end. He's been primarily just like a scoring guard that doesn't take care of the ball that well, as we alluded to. But on the defensive end, he's never really made much of an impact. So I worry about them again, like guarding, the elites of the guards in the Big 12 and in the country if they really wanted to compete at the national level. And then I also worry about their ability to rebound on the defensive end. Like you can kind of project like Xavier Edmonds, depending on what his role is, it appears as though he could be really impactful in defensive glass. David Punch is okay. But there's just not a ton of size across the, like they just have there's a bunch of positional size, but there's no real like big men to really help clean the glass. There's some athleticism on the roster, but I don't really like how they project as a defensive rebounding unit.
Yeah, I think the 5-man rotation is a weakness, and Harding and Pierre aren't like the greatest of defenders out there either. So it does create some concerns. I mean, I think David Punch is I think he's an awesome defender. Honestly, I think he can guard 1 through 5, and he played some small ball 5 last year when Uday went to the bench. I don't think he can do that in like a large sample size. So the big man group of Malik Diallo and Vianney Salachome they're going to have to step up and do something. I don't think they're great glass cleaners, but they're more pure rim protectors that at least have upside in that area. But upside isn't really what we're looking for. We're looking for production like now because those guys are going to have to play roles. And for a defense that finished 25th nationally last season and that group had better on-ball defenders, I think it's fair to say that this defense got a little bit worse because there are certain uncertainties from the backcourt and then from the 5-man rotation. I think the wings are the strength. I think all the other areas could be considered weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree. But now shifting to MVP and X Factor for TCU, who'd you go with?
Yeah, I went with Jaden Pierre by default. Really, I don't really see an actual star on this roster. I think if I had to pick one guy that's going to handle the on-ball scoring responsibility, it would be Jaden Pierre. I wanted to make it Xavier Edmonds. I ultimately made him my X factor because I do think the scoring versatility is truly there, and he can ultimately emerge as the MVP. And I wouldn't be all that surprised. So, but just the on-ball scoring ability of Jaden Pierre is why I went that route, and the upside of Edmonds.
Yeah, I went with Edmonds as my X factor as well. I think like based on the tape, there's too much there for upside to not make him the X factor. He could be, I think, a very impactful player on both ends as well as in the transition game, and really help take some pressure off of the 2 guards to generate offense. For me, I actually went with the other guard as my MVP in Brock Harding. I think, like you mentioned, he's shown the ability to generate some steals, career 4.1 or 3.6% steal rate. But for me, it was also his ability to shoot the ball at a 40% clip last year. And while he's not like a phenomenal on-ball creator, I do think he is a good passer. I do have concerns about him against like the elites of the Big 12 defenses and generating offense on the ball. But I do think like he is a really good passer to make up for that. Just he does also struggle with passing it to the other team sometimes. So I think he can be honestly, if I were to project, which I'll actually get to here in a minute with my bold prediction, I think it is going to be Xavier Edmonds that does end up being their MVP, but I'm making the safer pick with Brock Harding.
Yeah, I mean we don't want to look too bad on this podcast, right? Like we make a guy an MVP and he ends up not playing really at all. So I mean I kind of wanted him to be my MVP as well, but ultimately, I took the safer route. I think there's more. The way I viewed it, as I think there's more X factors on this team than there are actual like players that can emerge as an MVP. There's a lot of important players in certain positions. So, but ultimately, I think Edmonds is like the guy who has to be like the biggest X factor.
Right. Yeah. Now looking at ceiling and floor, and then a bold prediction for this team before we wrap things up. Where'd you put them in the Big 12?
Yeah, my ceiling was in that 7 or 8 range. I just don't see them getting up to where those like the elites of the Big 12 are. I think they could sit around the bubble, and I think that would probably be a ceiling outcome for them. Maybe like on the 9 or 10 line. Their floor, I had them as like a 12th or 13th. I still think their defense is going to be fine, despite like some of the issues that we have personnel wise, because Jamie Dixon defenses have been good recently, and it's a similar roster construction, so I don't really think they can fall all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, I went right kind of similarly in that middle. Again, my reasoning was I don't see them above a team like Texas Tech, who's slated to be 6th, so 7th seemed like the logical ceiling for them. Based depending on what Xavier Edmonds can give them, what the guards can give them. Floor, I went with 12th in this league. I think they're pretty firmly like just a solid average team in the Big 12 this year. That they have some strengths, they have some weaknesses, obviously, but they're really just a solid team in this league.
Yeah, that's very fair. I don't think they're rock bottom on offense or defense, but I don't really think there's an actual ceiling on either end.
No. Now, before we wrap things up, bold prediction for you.
Yeah, I think David Punch is going to make a first team all defense in the Big 12. I really liked what I saw on tape. I think he's one of the most versatile defenders in this league. He showed an ability to play small ball 5 last year, and he's a really good ISO defender. He has a ton of length at 6'7", plus his wide frame just allows him to do a lot of things within a defense. And I think he's kind of a perfect fit for Jamie Dixon's scheme.
Yeah. I like it. He's obviously very versatile. For me, I went the Xavier Edmonds route. We don't really know what he's going to play for a role, so this could end up looking foolish, but I'm going to predict he averages 15 points a game, and shoots 33% plus from 3, really providing like a floor spacing spark for this team. But again, we're going to look back at this and chuckle because Xavier Edmonds played in 8 games and averaged 6.3 minutes a game. But hey, I'm willing to stand on my hill.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to dive into it and see if Dixon's like saying anything about him in some press conferences preseason or something, just to see if we can get a little bit of a hint of what he's going to play for a role. If not, we're going to see what it looks like on night number 1 of the season. But from the tape, like, he's a super talented player.
Yeah, definitely. So that wraps things up for the Horned Frogs. We'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.